Okay, hello. We're going to finish up 4.5 notes and then you'll be able to finish the back of the 4.5 worksheet that I gave you on Tuesday. Um, what we're going to be talking about now is if I give you a graph, how do you go backwards and come up with an equation that matches it? Um, so we're going to kind of dissect these pictures. We're going to try to figure out what the amplitude is, what the period is, if there's any shifting or flipping, and what kind of a function we're looking at, if we're looking at cosine or sine. And just to let you know that there's going to be more than one correct answer to a lot of these. Um, so here we go. Let's just dive right in. So our first example, um, let's start by kind of identifying which function we can see. Do we see a sine function or do we see a cosine function? So sine, remember, had a beginning, a middle, and an end, all at the same place. It would go up, then down. So this is kind of what a sine would look like. Cosine had a beginning and an end up high. Halfway in the middle, it dipped down, and it had to cross through 0 to get there. So this is kind of more of a cosine graph. So when I'm looking at this picture, kind of what stands out to me, and I'll try to highlight it, would be from here to here, going up, then down. To me, that looks like a cosine graph just flipped. So I'm going to approach this problem as cosine flipped. Next thing we should try to figure out is the period. So this is spanning from 0 to 2 pi. So that means it has a period of 2 pi. When we're looking at our general form of an equation, on Tuesday we talked about how this would be the general form. And so we would need to figure out the amplitude and we would need to figure out b. B is not the period, but it's part of how you figure out the period. The period equals 2 pi divided by b. So I know that the period of this is 2 pi. So then what would be the value of b? So b would equal 1. In terms of the amplitude, do you see how the kind of the midline that is splitting this graph right in half is on the x-axis? And so if I go up from that midline, I'm going up 2. And likewise, if I go down from the midline, I'm going down 2. So that means that the amplitude is 2. And then let's look at any shifting. So cosine usually starts on the y-axis, and it is starting on the y-axis. It just flipped down. So it's not being shifted to the left or to the right at all. No shift left or right. And then is there any shift up or down? Is the whole thing moving up or down? And in this case, no. And you can tell that the midline right there, since that's on the x-axis, that indicates there's no shift up or down. So basically, in our formula, there's going to be no h and there's going to be no k. But do remember we flipped it. So there's a negative sign. The amplitude is 2. Our function was cosine. The b value was 1. There's no h or k, so we just have an x. And if you don't want to write that 1 right there, you could just say negative 2 cosine of x. And that could be an equation that fits our picture. Okay? Let's go to the next one. All right, so looking at this picture, pick out whether you see a sine or a cosine. Personally, what sticks out to me is from here to here, I see a cosine graph. So if we're trying to figure out the period, it looks like it would be starting at pi over 4 and ending at 5 pi over 4. So what is that span from pi over 4 to 5 pi over 4? Well, you could subtract. You could do 5 pi over 4 minus pi over 4, and you would get 4 pi over 4, which is pi. So the period is pi. If I want to find the b value, remember that the period equals 2 pi over b, and we've just identified that the period is pi. So we can solve for b. If you want to, you could cross multiply and do pi times b equals 2 pi. And in order to get the b alone, we would have to divide by pi. So that means that our b value is 2. Okay, let's try to figure out the amplitude. See if you can figure out where the midline would be between here and here. One way to figure that out, well, you could just eyeball it, but another way to figure it out is this is going from -1 up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is a span of 6. From -1 to 5 is a span of 6. Half of 6 is 3. So if I was to go up 3 from here, 1, 2, 3, that would put me right there. Or if I went from the top down, 1, 2, 3, it's putting my midline at 2. So again, up from the midline was 3, down from the midline was 3. That means that the amplitude is 3. That midline has significance. Wherever the midline is, that helps you figure out your shift up or down. So since this midline is at 2, that means we have a shift up 2. Another shift we have to look at is the fact that this cosine graph is starting here. It's not starting on the y-axis like it typically does. It's slightly shifted to the right, and it's shifted to the right by pi over 4. So we have amplitude, we have our b value, we have our shifting. Is there any flipping happening? No, because cosine usually starts high, ends high, and goes down in the middle. Excuse me. So we're ready to write our equation. Remember the general form would be a cosine b and then x minus h plus k. So in this case, the amplitude was 3, so that's our a value. The b value we figured out was 2. We shifted to the right, so that means a minus, and it was shifted by pi over 4. And then we had a shift up 2, so that would be plus 2. So this would be our equation. Okay, let's try another one. All right, in this picture, I have the midline drawn in for you. So that's nice. So that midline is down at -1, -2, -3, -4. So that means that we have a shift down 4. That's also going to help us figure out our amplitude, because you would count down from the midline or up from the midline, and that would be your amplitude. So it looks like we're going up 1, 2, 3, and also the same down 3. So that's our amplitude. The next thing would be to figure out whether you're seeing a sine graph or a cosine graph. So I'm seeing sine, beginning, middle, and end in the same place. This sine, though, is dipping down first and then going up. So that means that there's a flip. Any other shifting going on? Well, sine typically starts on the y-axis, but this is shifted over by 1. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, so it's a shift over to the right by 1. And then the period is the only other thing we haven't figured out yet. So we're starting at 1 and we're going to 9. So from 1 to 9 is a period of 8. But remember, period is equal to 2 pi over b, and ultimately we need to know that b value. So right now I know that the period is 8, so let's solve for the b value. So you could cross multiply. 8 times b would equal 2 pi. If I want b alone, I'm going to have to divide by 8 and reduce that down. It looks like b is pi over 4. So we have our a value, we have our b value, we have a shift down and a shift right, and also a flip. So if we go to write our equation, it would be, let me get the general version written here. Okay, so we have a flip, so it'll be a negative. Then the a value was a 3. The b value was pi over 4. X. Then we had a shift to the right 1, so that would be a -1. And then we had a shift down of 4, so that would be a -4. Okay. Let's see. Oh, on this one, I just wanted to show you an alternate answer. So that's the answer we got. But let's say you were looking at this and you were thinking, I don't see the sine, I see cosine. So for example, if you started here and ended here, that would be a cosine graph. It has the same amplitude. It would have the same period. It would be going from -1 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. From -1 to 7 is a span of 8, so it still has a period of 8, which means that the b value is still pi over 4. The only thing that would be different now is shifting. So if we're looking at a cosine graph, it's starting to the left 1. And the shifting of that midline down 4 is still the same. I could actually keep that. So the only thing is that it's shifted to the left one. And there's no flipping because cosine usually starts high and ends high. So if I was going to write a cosine function, again, there's no flipping, so there'd be no negative sign. The amplitude is still 3. The b value is still pi over 4. But this is a shift to the left one, so we would have plus 1. And it's still a shift down 4. So that would be another equation that would also work. It just depends on whether you're seeing a cosine graph or a sine graph. So on your worksheet, on the very back page of the worksheet, the 4.5 worksheet, there's going to be at least 2 answers that would be totally fine. And I will post the answer key to that on PowerSchool. So you can have the rest of the time to work on that worksheet. And then tomorrow we'll do 4.6. Thank you.